Hi everyone, it's midway through the year time. What joy, what rapture, we're fast barreling through 2023, and honestly, it's been a really good year for new music releases so far. There's been a lot of music that I've really wanted to gush about and just throw at anybody who'll want to hear it, and I really do appreciate the fact that you guys have been checking out the stuff that I've been recommending, and I really do hope that you've got something out of the reviews I've been doing this year. But it is that midway point. Now, last year I didn't bother doing one of these because I kind of wanted to save everything until the end of the year. But this year, you know what? I'm going to do things a little bit differently in terms of rankings. So, we're in July. January to June is done. I want to take a little bit of a moment to talk about what I consider to be the current 10 best records of 2023. Now, to keep a little bit of air of a mystery about things, I'm not going to rank these in numerical order. You know, you're not going to get my number 1 pick, my number 5 pick, blah, 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 blah. We're just going to keep this in alphabetical order with the band's name. So, each and every single one of these is brilliant, fantastic, wonderful even. And every single one of these genuinely has a shot at being like the current top spot of the year. There's very little that separates these bands and these albums, I'll be brutally honest with you all. So it's going to make doing like my actual proper ranking at the end of the year where I do put things numerically kind of difficult. All of these might not feature. Maybe none of these will feature. I just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming out, and Stephen Wilson hasn't put his, the Harmony Codex isn't out yet, so everybody else be sweating when that comes out. So, let's cut the chit-chat, let's cut the waffle, and let's get straight down into business. And we're first of all going to talk about the Anchoret, and their new album which came out just a moment ago, It All Began With Loneliness. I've been really, really digging on this record. It's this fantastic debut album, and it really does feel like they're pulling out all the punches with this one. Like, they've made an impact. They've splash landed into the scene, and they're just like, hey, look at us, we've got a lot to offer. And honestly, I can't say enough good things about this record. I think possibly the only thing holding it back from a tiniest bit is maybe it's a little bit derivative of its sources, but honestly, I'm not too bothered by that if the end product sounds as good as it does, and in the case of the Anchoret, I cannot think highly enough of this band. These guys, if they carry on doing what they have been doing, are genuinely going to be going places, and I'm delighted to be able to include them in this list. Up next, again, is another debut record from Crust. Once again, much like the Anchoret, these guys are very much following, the path led by their inspiration. In this case, it happens to be very much sort of, Porcupine Tree and Opeth. But luckily, those are two of like my favourite bands of all time, so it came as little surprise that Crust had a really big impact on me. The Approbation is a wonderful record. It's perfectly sized, perfectly formed, and genuinely it's a great deal of fun. Which, honestly, isn't the sort of thing you normally attribute to bands like Porcupine Tree and Opeth, because they're quite serious, they're not really, light-hearted or anything like that. But during my time with the Approbation, I felt the joy that the band was putting into this record. You could feel the enthusiasm for what they're doing. And again, much like with the Anchoret, if these guys continue down the path that they've done, they are going to be one of the world beaters in the prog scene within the next couple of years. Crownlands, with their record Fearless, follows up next, and we are still apparently on the subject matter of, taking a lot from your influences, as this is basically a Rush album. It just is. It's a Rush album. If you're familiar with Rush at all, you've got the likes of Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, 2112. It's all in this album. It's basically like I don't want to say a tribute act because that feels disingenuous to the effort the band has put into this record, but it's very much seen from the hymn sheet that Rush laid down back in the sort of mid to late 70s and early 80s. Personally, I'm fine with this because I love Rush, one of my favourite bands of all time. To have this record that sounds so familiar to the stuff that I love from the Canadian trio, it's fine. I mean, these guys are doing it as a duo as well, which is kind of crazy. It's a really fun record, really great. Definitely check it out if you haven't done yet. Now then, we're getting to something a bit more sort of fiercely bold and original with Dodd Heimsgard and Black Medium Current. This is a huge, behemoth of a record. Massively ambitious, sort of this crazy kind of avant-garde black metal, I suppose, is the best way to describe this record. It's so expansive, though, and covers a huge variety of moods, much more than you'd expect from just a typical black metal record, of course. I mean, the whole avant-garde section kind of, fixes into that. But it's really, really solid. There are so many little moments on this which really sort of elevate this above any sort of traditional or typical black metal record. It's why this is on this list rather than something like Enslaved, with their latest record. Which, no disrespect to that album, it's incredible. But Dodd Heimsgard are doing something a little bit more with the genre and really pushing the envelope that little bit further. And for that reason, I had to include it on this list. HMLTD and The Worm. Speaking of avant-garde strangeness, doesn't get more avant-garde and more strange than this. The Worm is, goodness me, it's a really odd concept album. It's kind of like a dystopian medieval England where a worm is eating the country, but is the worm real? Is it fake? Is it in your head? Is it alive? We don't know. Nobody knows. What I do know about this record is that it has scared the absolute bejesus out of my long-suffering other half, bless them, and they are, cautious of this record as a result. I personally adore this album. I think it is doing things with music that I haven't heard people do in a long time. I think it is fierce in its creativity. It is absolutely one of the most engaging things I've listened to this year. Absolutely outside of my normal wheelhouse, but I love it 100%, and I really think everyone owes it to themselves to give it a listen just once. The old guard are back. It's Neobelivas and Exul. Now, I have been a big fan of Neobelivas for a very long time. I've seen them live a few times, and they are honestly one of my favourite Australian bands of all time. They really just do hit all the buttons for sort of that extreme prog metal that I love so much. And it was such a treat for these guys to finally be back after so long since their previous record. And they haven't skipped a beat. Everything fits on here, everything's exactly how I remember it being, but at the same time they are taking new and exciting risks, they are pushing the boundaries in terms of their musicianship and their compositional ability, and it really does feel like the band has matured like a fine wine in the time that we've been without them. 100% still one of the best records of the year. Absolutely look into this if you haven't done yet, especially if you're a fan of the more extreme sides of progressive metal. Okay, newest entry onto the list, it's No Spoon and Opus. Now, I reviewed this not very long ago, and my thoughts and feelings on this record still maintain exactly as I spoke about them, only a few days ago. This record's wonderful, it's brilliant, it's so much goddamned fun. Some records out there, they take themselves either not seriously enough or they take themselves too seriously. I think that No Spoon have sort of found the balance between the two. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it's pompous. Yes, it's maximalist to all hell, but my God, the band are having so much fun with this record that you really just feel that enthusiasm. Again, yes, it's maybe a little bit too similar to some of their influences, but as I've made abundantly clear in this video, I'm okay with bands doing this so long as they make good music. And No Spoon have made an incredible record with Opus, and I absolutely beseech you all to check this one out. It is certain to be riding high at the end of the year list. Okay, speaking of surprises, it was OK Goodnight with The Fox and the Bird. One record that I absolutely just picked up on a whim based on the strength of the cover. And I am so absolutely delighted that I did so, because this is one of the finest, most engaging, most interesting concept albums I've heard in quite some time. Storyline's quite simple, bunch of animals, drought, mystical raccoon, save the world, yada yada. But it's a good journey. It's just a lot of engaging music. There's so many different moods and styles that it sort of segues through over the course of its runtime. There's literally pretty much something for everyone on here, whether you're a fan of the sort of folksy, acoustic, gentle side of bands like the Deer Hunter, or maybe you're into more aggressive, darkened, howling death metal of the likes of Between the Buried and Me. It's all here, it's all accounted for, and it manages to mix all of these ingredients into one coherent whole, and absolutely it works. It might not have done, but it does. Definitely look into this one, highly recommended. I love this album. Now then, we come to Belgium's Omnerard with The Immensal Rise. This one absolutely power slammed me into the floor when I first heard it. It's this huge, massive 7-track, 70+ minute long record, and it absolutely exemplifies everything I love about extreme progressive metal. This is Between the Buried and Me turned up to 11.5. There is absolutely a ridiculous amount going on this album, but every single moment is used to effectiveness. There isn't a single moment of dead air on this record. Everything makes sense. Everything pulls together beautifully into one of the most exciting releases of the year. Definitely look into this one, especially if you like your metal huge, engaging, and mad. And last but by no means least in the alphabetical list, we have The World Is Quiet Here, with Zon. Now, if Omnerard were very much a kind of everything but the kitchen sink band, this record is kind of everything in the kitchen sink from several households. This record is a lot. I think more so than anything else on this list, this is probably the hardest record to get into. But I do think it is potentially the most rewarding if you give it its dues. It is not a... It's not a straightforward record by any stretch of the imagination. There is a lot going on. Some of it doesn't seem to make sense on the first few listens, actually. And even now, like some 6 months after it came out, because I think it came out in January, I think. Yeah. I'm still struggling to get my head around some parts of it, but in a good way. This is a challenging record. One that really sort of throws up your notions about what to expect from progressive metal, and then brings it back down, whirls it around, throws it back out, and makes you try and figure out what order everything's in. Because it is so... It's so much. It is so much. But honestly, I love a challenge. I love a challenge. And nothing so far this year has challenged me quite like Zon has. And for that reason alone, I have to include it in the list just because of how bold, creative, and interesting it actually is. So that's it for so far the year, from January through to June of 2023. Those are my current favourite 10 records. I'll leave it to you guys to decide which of these is currently my number one pick, because I have ranked them chronologically up here, but you'll have to wait until the end of the year to see if any of these actually make the cut for the true top 10. But until then, guys, keep your rhyme signatures odd.